Next up we have tackling stem cell tourism, educating the desperate or whacking the mold, from Ubaka Ogbogu, who is assistant professor of health law. He is assistant professor and CAT research fellow in health law at the Faculty of Law here at the University of Alberta. He holds degrees in law from the universities of Benin in Nigeria and the University of Alberta, and is completing a doctorate in law at the University of Toronto. He is a member of the University of Alberta's Health Law and Science Policy Group. As CAT's research fellow, he's involved in building research and teaching links between the faculties of law and pharmacy, and he teaches a course in pharmacy law and ethics in the Faculty of Pharmacy. Join me in welcoming.
So today I'm going to talk to you about a phenomenon that I've been studying for the past 5 years or so, and that's stem cell tourism. Now, quick show of hands. Who knows what a stem cell is? Oh, great. Well, it kind of makes sense. When you spend the Sunday afternoon going to a science talk, you will have some idea about what a stem cell is. Okay, but I want to very quickly, since most of you know about it, I'll quickly go through a refresher. Now, stem cells are cells in living beings that have an ability to do something special, different from every other cell that we have in our bodies. The way that defined scientifically is that they are unspecialized cells that continuously divide to produce specialized cells in our body. What does this mean? It means that a stem cell, biologically speaking, doesn't have any function, but it's able to divide like most cells do, and it's able to do so continuously, in perpetuity, to form other cells that have more specific functions. Right? That's what a stem cell does essentially. Now, stem cells are exciting for two main reasons. So if you look at this diagram, a stem cell has an ability to self-renew and become a copy of itself, or it could differentiate, it could renew and become something else. And so stem cells have an ability to form a copy of themselves or a copy of any other of the cells that we find in our bodies. So take the hematopoietic stem cell, for example. This is a blood stem cell. A blood stem cell has the ability to divide to become another blood stem cell or to become any of the other cells that we find in the human blood. Neural stem cells, same idea. It can become another neural stem cell, or it can become all cells of the neural lineage, like the neurons and the glia. And then the fun one, embryonic stem cells, which I'm sure everyone has heard about. Embryonic stem cells are stem cells found in very early stage human embryos, or in very early stage embryos. And they have this ability to make all the cell types in our bodies. So we are what we are today as adults because embryonic stem cells produce all the cells, which then became our organs and tissues, and is able to go through the process of development to form a human adult. So stem cells have two unique abilities. They can divide and differentiate to become other cell types in our bodies. This unique ability holds great promise for science and for medicine. The reason being that, in theory, stem cells provide a way to replenish cells in our bodies that have become diseased or damaged. So stem cells, because it has the ability to divide and become other cells, in theory, you can take a stem cell, culture it in a lab, and use it to produce other cells for the purpose of regenerating the cells that are diseased or damaged in our bodies. Now, most of the diseases, especially the ones that we haven't found an answer for so far, that science hasn't been able to find an answer for, are caused by cell damage or cell death. So the idea behind stem cell research is that you can take stem cells, culture them in a lab, isolate them, and be able to produce cells to transplant back into the human body to regenerate or regrow those diseased or damaged cells. So here's a diagram that gives you a sense of how stem cell therapy is supposed to work. So if you start with the sperm and the egg, which are the human productive gametes, each say you culture in the lab, you can bring them together, form a fertilized egg. Around the 5th day stage, you form something called a blastocyst. That blastocyst contains stem cells. If you extract those and purify them in the lab and culture them, in theory you could be able to grow other cells, organs, and tissues, and then transplant them back into a patient who is suffering from some kind of disease that is related to cell death or cell damage. So same idea here. You could also take a donor, extract stem cells from their bodies, purify it, culture it, and then transplant it back into a recipient. So this is the idea behind stem cell research. It is huge. It holds significant promise. It is being heralded as the next big thing in medicine, as the next big thing in science. If this works, this can solve many of the problems that we haven't been able to solve medically today. So there's significant promise behind this technology. Now this promise has of course produced a ton of hype, right? As you can see from the cover of the Economist and Time magazine and that piece from the Telegraph. This is portrayed in popular culture and popular press as something big. It's a revolution. It's going to produce miracle cures. This is the way we're going to solve all the problems we haven't been able to solve so far with things like cancer, Alzheimer's, and all those kinds of diseases, diabetes. This will bring a solution. This will bring miracle cures to these sorts of problems. So there's a lot of hype around stem cells. But this hype doesn't match reality. The truth is that stem cells and stem cell research is still at a very experimental stage. The technology is still in the lab. There's very few stem cell treatments that have actually made it into the clinic. Most scientists anticipate that this will work out. But their predictions as to when it will finally get to the clinic, as to when it will become a routine part of healthcare, is anywhere from the next 20 to the next 50 years. This is not something that's happening right now in terms of having actual therapies to use in the clinic. However, all that hype has produced the phenomenon I'm talking about today, which is the premature marketing of unproven stem cell products and therapies. Right? So some people out there have caught on to this hype. They started using this idea of stem cells, this notion that stem cells are the next big thing, as a way to sell products or to provide therapies to patients, saying that these therapies are stem cell therapies. But there's no scientific support for what they're providing. These therapies, for the most part, are unproven. Here's some examples. One of the ways we've seen stem cells marketed to the general public is through cosmetic products. So we have things like this. If you go on the internet, do a search for stem cell facial, stem cell cream, stem cell whatever, you come up with things like this. So this is stem cell soap, which is age-defying. It also moisturizes too. Good stuff. Even Hollywood stars have gone into involved in the actual advertising and marketing stem cells. So this is an ad I found in Cosmo. Don't ask me why I was in Cosmo. But in that ad, it was Julia Roberts marketing this stem cell makeup. And then we've seen things like plant stem cells. I think this is stem cells derived from apples. Now nobody is really sure if there's actually any stem cell in these kinds of products. But these providers have used the idea of stem cell as a way to sell products. This ad is also from Cosmo, says stem cells are the future of skin rejuvenation, and have a product to back up that claim. And then one final example. There's a company in the US that sells different kinds of stem cell products, everything from the firming serum to eye cream to moisturizer. So for those of you who are interested in becoming more beautiful, you can just Google this stuff. I'll leave it up there for a while. You just jot it down. Alright. The phenomenon though that I'm concerned about in my research is stem cell tourism. This is a phenomenon whereby patients travel from their countries to a different country, to a clinic in a different country, to receive stem cell treatment. So, these are usually patients who are desperate, who haven't found any answers to the problems that are having, to the medical problems that are having within their own country. And so, they go to a different country. It's called stem cell tourism because it's a form of medical tourism. They go there not just to receive treatment, but also to get to know a new locale, to experience the culture. So it's a package that's sold to them. And they travel from their countries to a different country to receive these stem cell treatments. Here are some examples of clinics in other countries that advertise stem cell treatments to their clients, typically through the internet. So this is a clinic in China which claims to provide stem cell treatments and which provides these treatments mostly to foreign clients. Here's another example of a clinic in the US that does the same thing. It's called Stem Cell of America. This website targets minors and young children. M-Cell is a clinic in Ukraine which claims to treat all those diseases. I actually took half the page. There's a long list of diseases. But they claim this is just things that they okay, get HIV. So they can actually treat HIV with stem cells. Now I put up this clinic because it gives you a sense of how they actually try to reach their clients. So they have the contact us bar on my right. And over here there's a guy called Jamie who's ready to talk to you. Just click on that to tell you more about stem cell treatment. And then lastly is this clinic from Ukraine, I believe. It's called the Institute for Cellular Therapy. And they use sort of this image of a very happy family. You know, mother, father, grandparents who have received stem cell treatment and are not very happy. And they also claim to treat a long list of diseases, including something called insults. I don't know if you can see that. Alright, so here's some facts about these treatments. Most of the patients who go for these treatments are mainly driven by hope and desperation. Right? It's not laughing matter really, these are people who have sort of reached the end of their quest in terms of medical treatments. They don't have any solution for the problems they're facing. So they're driven by this hope that these stem cells will provide a cure for the problems that they're facing, or some form of relief. Now that's not to say that every patient who goes for these treatments is driven by hope and desperation. We also see patients who go because they want to be stronger, they want to be more beautiful, and it's not necessarily hope that drives them. They just want something that will enhance some form of enhancement. I'll show an example shortly about a woman who traveled to Mexico to get a stem cell facelift. That person obviously is not looking to solve the medical problem, they're just looking to be more beautiful. So there's those kind of patients as well. But for the most part, the patients we see are driven by hope and desperation. Now these clinics claim to have treated over 10,000 patients, including minors, including young persons. Most of their patients travel from places like Canada, UK, US, and Australia. And the top treatment destinations are in China, Ukraine, Mexico, and India. These clinics typically provide no follow-up care, right? You go there, you check into a clinic that looks like a hotel. And we know this because I follow patient blogs. And so you read about the experiences. It's really a good time for them. They go there, they welcome them, they treat them well. It's like you're in a hotel, all your rooms are cared for. They provide them the treatment and they say, off you go. So if there's any complications that arise, they bring that back to their home country. And we also know now from the research we've done on this that patients increasingly consult with their healthcare providers prior to travel. So they'll actually talk to their doctors. They'll tell their doctors about their plans to go for this treatment. And one of the things that I'm studying now is how doctors should respond to these sorts of inquiries from their patients, because there's interesting legal and ethical issues around how doctors should deal with this sort of therapies. Okay, more treatment facts. As I said before, the treatment is not supported by scientific evidence. I've done studies that indicate that all of the treatments offered through these clinics are not really backed up by anything you can call good science. The clinics typically market their services to patients through the internet. And we've done a study of those internet sites. We show that the clinics tend to emphasize the benefits of treatment and say nothing about risks. So if you read those websites, you're going to see a lot of talk about cures, about improvement, about this being the best treatment you possibly get, and nothing about risk. As a matter of fact, most of the clinics claim that there's no risk whatsoever associated with receiving stem cell treatment. Now the media covers stories about people who've gone for stem cell treatment, but they typically present the stories as a human interest story. Here's this person who's driven by hope and desperation, who has reached the end of the road, and they've gone for this treatment, and they've come back, they've seen some improvement, they're happy. That's how the media presents it. There's never any attempt to try and present the other side of the story, which is that these treatments have not been proven scientifically, and that these treatments have not been approved in Canada or elsewhere for clinical use. Some examples. This is a story in The Star, which is a Toronto-based newspaper, national newspaper. This story ran in The Star about this woman who went to Mexico to receive stem cell treatment. I think she had ALS or something like that, but she went to Mexico to receive treatment. Now the story talks about her experiences, about how she got to where she was, about her medical problem, and even includes that an account where you can send money to help her pay for the treatment, right? Which is really fascinating. But there's nowhere in the story where it's mentioned that the treatment that she's going to receive in Mexico has not been scientifically proven, and that it might in fact have adverse side effects, or that it has not been approved for use in Canada. Here's another example. This is from New Zealand, about young Holly's brave stem cell quest. Again, same kind of idea. The media typically presents the stories in a very critical manner. We did a study recently at our group in the Health Law, at the Health Law Institute here at the Faculty of Law, looking at how Chinese newspapers cover the providers of this treatment in China. Remember I said China is one of the main treatment destinations, and so trying to look at how Chinese media portrays this treatment and portrays the providers of this treatment in China. We found that the providers in China, the clinics in China, actually control the message. All the stories that the media receives come from the providers. They shape the message. They use the Chinese media essentially as a marketing tool for their services. Now, these treatments are very expensive. That's your angle. Very expensive. This family spent $8,000 on their stem cell mission. And then there's this woman who's a U.S. citizen who is legally blind and sought treatment to try and correct that problem in Mexico, I believe. And she also spent a significant amount of money. I think it was about $35,000 that she spent on the treatment. And at the time this story ran, she was raising money to go for a second treatment. So the article states that the treatment that the second set of treatment that is going to go for will cost about $32,000 and take 35 days. So her family was hosting a spaghetti dinner, bake sale and raffle to try and raise this money to go for this treatment. So these are ordinary people who are swayed by these messages they get from these providers and from these clinics, and they spend significant amounts of money to go for a treatment that's not proven or approved in their country. Now what's really interesting is that this woman also knows, the clinic told her this, that it could take up to 2 years for her to get an improvement in vision. But she's still going. 2 years. So it's not that she goes there, receives stem cells, and then there's going to be some kind of improvement. It will take 2 years for her to see any improvement at all. And the improvement is not actually defined. But she's still raising $32,000 for this treatment. This tells you about the power of stem cells and about the power that it has on our popular imagination and how we've reacted to this technology. even though there's no proof right now that it's actually ready for clinical use. And then lastly, there's this website that's set up by the parents of this 5-year-old to raise money to send her for stem cell treatment. Now this is the stem cell treatment she's going for, and the website, parents are asking for $20,000 so that she can go to receive stem cell treatment for autism in Kiev. On the website, parents state that stem cell treatment is our best chance at improving her life. So they're going to spend significant amounts of money to fly the little girl to Kiev to receive stem cell treatment in the hope that this will bring some improvement to her life. They've gone for the first of treatment, and there wasn't much improvement, which is the reason why they're going for the second. They didn't notice some improvement, and so they feel motivated to go for a second one, believing that perhaps this time they will notice enough improvement to make it worthwhile. Okay, these treatments have real consequences. Remember when I told you about the one doing the stem cell facelift? She came back with bones green in her eyes, right? This is because stem cells have this ability to become anything. So if they actually inject real stem cells into your body, there's no telling what they can become. In this woman's case, she obviously got something that can grow, and that grew into bones, which came out of her eyes. Gross. I'm going to get it. It freaks me out. In Europe, in Germany, a stem cell clinic was shut down after a baby died. When a baby died after receiving stem cell treatment. So this gives you a sense that these treatments have real consequences. Now we don't know for a fact if what these patients receive when they go for this treatment is actually stem cells. It's possible that just give them failure. Nobody knows. But for those patients who receive stem cells, there will be negative consequences. Now I was using myself as a guinea pig to see what they actually give stem cells. So I'm thinking of going to China and receiving stem cell treatments, but I probably should break my leg first so I have a real medical problem. But nobody really knows. The point is nobody really knows what this patient receives. But for those patients who have actually received stem cells, they usually end up with negative consequences. Alright. So this is a tough problem to regulate. Because it happens outside of the country where regulators can do anything about it. Now in Canada, we have very strict laws about how you can bring a product to the clinic, about how you can translate science into therapies that are used in the clinic. How Canada regulates it. There's very strict rules around how you take research into the clinic. You have to do clinical trials, you have to do animal studies. It's a long process that takes anywhere from 20 to 50 years. But those rules don't exist in the places where these clinics set up shop. So in places like China, it's not very clear what the rules are that you have to follow with respect to this treatment. We've seen that in China and places like Mexico, these clinics are allowed to operate without much regulatory oversight. So the question is, how do you regulate a problem that involves your citizens and patients in your country, but which doesn't occur within your jurisdiction? How do Canadian regulators address this problem? Now, the providers typically operate in countries where there's little or no regulatory oversight, right? So if you go to a place like Bermuda, Bermuda, Panama, places where the legal system isn't quite set up to deal with these sorts of treatments. They also use the internet to directly reach and recruit patients. So it's tough, as you know, with everything that has to do with the internet, it's tough to really get a handle on how to regulate the problem. Now, providers have been shut down in several countries. In Germany, for example, after that baby died, the clinic in Germany was shut down. Providers have been shut down in Costa Rica and in the US as well. We started to see providers in the US, but the FDA in the US is taking action against these clinics. But it's like whacking a mole right? And let's go to that of my talk. You shut them down in one place, they simply pop up someplace else. So the clinic in the US that was shut down by the FDA is called Celtex. Soon as they were shut down, they simply moved their business to Mexico, right? And they're now set up in Mexico. So it's really tough to regulate the problem. Several international organizations have tried to provide education to patients to inform them about stem cells, inform them about stem cell treatments, give them some information about what treatments have reached the clinic and which ones haven't. So, organizations like the International Society for Stem Cell Research, which is an international collaboration of stem cell scientists, have put out some guidance, which is available on their website, to try and inform patients about these treatments and about what kinds of clinics are operating in different countries to provide unproven treatments. Now, when ISSCR first set up a website, their goal was to provide a service whereby somebody who was contemplating treatment could send them the name of the clinic, and then they'll do some kind of investigation, look at the treatment that's been offered by the clinic, and provide advice to that patient about whether the clinic was legit or not. The minute they did that, the providers threatened legal action. They got their lawyers to draft a letter to ISSCR saying, if you don't take down this website, we're going to sue you. Now, this is an international collaboration of scientists. They don't have lawyers. I don't think they even have the resources to get lawyers, so they, shut down the website. But there's guidance out there. There's guidance from the MS Society, there's guidance from ISSCR that tries to educate these desperate patients on what kinds of treatments are available and where the science is going. We recently did a study where we found that even with all that guidance, the providers are still pushing hard to try and recruit patients. All that guidance, all the regulatory activity hasn't done much to change what they're doing. They simply, they've actually become much more forceful in their marketing. They've redesigned their websites. They started to introduce all kinds of tools to try and engage their patients and to try and recruit them to come for this treatment. So nothing really has worked. Now, I think I'm running out of time. How much is that? 5 to 10 minutes. 5 to 10 minutes? Okay. So I want to talk about a number of ideas that have come up in the literature for how you can regulate this problem. I quite frankly don't think any of them will work. So I'll let you leave some time for you to tell me what you think might work for this problem, or if you even think this is a problem at all to begin with. But I'll discuss some of the approaches that have been suggested for dealing with the problem very briefly. The first is to try and deter patients from going for these treatments. And one of the ways that people have talked about doing this is to amend the tax code to make expenses for going for stem cell treatment ineligible for the medical deduction on that tax code. So that's one way that's suggested. Yep. Another strategy is to say that when you come back with problems, if you come back with bones growing in your eyes, then you can't be covered under our public healthcare system for that problem. You have to pay out of pocket for something that you knowingly, maybe your doctor told you not to go to treatment, you knowingly did something that is detrimental to your health. So if you come back with problems in our healthcare system, our publicly funded healthcare system, you shouldn't have to pay for it. You should have to pay for it yourself. Now, I'm not a big fan of these strategies because I think they constitute penalties on human desperation. I don't think these patients do this for fun. They are patients who are driven by health, they're driven by desperation. I don't think you impose penalties on them for trying to make their lives better. I also don't think it's ethical for doctors to turn away patients because they've gone for treatment elsewhere and they've come up with problems. We certainly don't ask in Canada what brought you to the hospital. We assume that if you come with a medical problem, we'll solve it if we have the means to solve it. We don't ask you about the underlying reason for that problem. If you can draw analogies between this approach and say someone being turned away for smoking and ending up with cancer, somebody eating McDonald's and becoming obese, and somebody going bungee jumping. We just don't do that in Canada. So I think this is actually against the law in Canada. It's not something that we should pursue. Now, finally, I think I'm going to stop here. Finally, some have talked about imposing a duty on healthcare professionals to discuss these treatments with their patients when they come in to seek the advice about whether to travel. That doctors should have a duty to make sure that they advise their patients not to go for treatment, that they tell them these treatments are unproven, and that they are likely to end up with side effects which will have to be dealt with here in Canada. I think there's some potential in this, but I don't know if it should be a duty. I think it should be a self-obligation. I think you should inform doctors about the problem and let them provide advice to their clients, but I don't think you should impose a duty on them, because the minute you impose a duty on them, if they fail to meet that duty, then they open themselves up to claims of medical negligence. Okay, I'll stop there. And I'll take questions.
Anybody have a question?
Have any patients been successfully treated by a legitimate stem cell therapy yet?
Yes. Yes, autologous stem cell therapies that I use in context of cancer care, for example, where you take a patient's own stem cells, or like bone marrow cells, right? Bone marrow cells are clone stem cells. You use those and you transplant that back into the patient. But those have been approved for use. They have very, very limited use. They don't really provide, it depends on at what stage of the disease that you use it, right? There is some of it, but very, very few. And the approved ones are not those that discriminate claims are offered.
So people who go away for stem cell treatment, is that affecting research being done in countries they're using? So for example, research currently being done in Canada, US, UK, Australia, is that having an impact on the researchers can do or what?
Not directly, but it will eventually. For one, the research arena in Canada is very complicated because of all the issues around embryonic stem cells. We have a law in Canada that limits what you can do from a research perspective. So scientists cannot create embryos for the purpose of doing research on those embryos. Tie it back to the whole abortion debate and all the fuzzy ethical and legal questions around embryos. So my point is not much research going on anyway in Canada because of all the laws that we have around stem cells. But researchers fear that if this goes on, at some point something really nasty is going to happen, and that's going to affect the field in general. Now we've seen a similar thing happen in the context of gene therapy. When gene therapy was at its peak, when it was really exciting and had a lot of potential, some scientists in the US rushed too quickly to clinical trial. They didn't do everything they were supposed to do, and a patient died. And that basically killed, as far as I'm concerned, killed the field of gene therapy. Right? And you have to be able to recover fully from that. So scientists fear that if this goes on, at some point something really bad is going to happen, and it's going to have severe impact on the field, and it's going to be able to do what it is.
Any of these clinics that are operating in places like Mexico, China, is there any research or papers coming out of some of those clinics that are talking about what they're doing, or is it kind of really shrouded in secrecy?
Well, I've been sort of researching that area for the past 5 years. There's a ton of studies we've done that show what clinics do. It's tough to get a sense of their actual operations. So we use sort of paralysis to study what they do. So we study their websites, we study patient blogs. I'm thinking of offering myself as a guinea pig. But for the most part, nobody's really sure what's going on in those clinics. It's tough to get them to actually talk to you, right? Because once I suppose they just Google your name, and if your name shows up on any paper, they're not talking to you. So it's really tough to get a sense of what they're doing. They hardly ever open up. And in fact, sometimes they actually get aggressive. I remember sometime about 3 years ago, I got a call from a local newspaper somewhere in Ontario, They were covering a story about a member of the community who was going to China to receive treatment from a clinic called Beiki. And so they wanted to know, based on the studies we've done and what we've written, what we thought about these patients who were losing money to go to China. And I offered my opinion, and about 10 minutes after that, the reporter called me back and asked me if I wanted to talk to the Beiki person, because I had something she wanted to say to me. I said, well, no, I don't think so. I said, well, you should talk to him because he's really mad at you. I thought the more reason why I should talk to him. Let's begin.
I'm just curious, like, you just talked about this lady on how much bones going on his eyes, and you're willing to put yourself possibly to
Right.
What's your follow-up to that? Like, what are you hoping to gain?
Well, I'll probably chicken out. No, I actually mean it. What I want to do is actually get into the clinic and observe what's going on.
Okay.
But when he gets to the treatment, I'm like, no, I don't know the treatment anymore. I'm not